They sat me at the back table next to the kitchen door, like I was some embarrassing relative who might scare off the wealthy guests with my worn boots and simple suit. Ethan's family whispered and pointed, making sure everyone knew the bride's father was just a poor rancher who didn't belong at their five-star resort wedding. Little did they know this broke cowboy was hiding $45 million, and their precious son-in-law was about to make the most expensive mistake of his life. If you're watching this, drop a comment and tell me, have you ever been underestimated because of your age or appearance? Sometimes the biggest surprises come in the smallest packages. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. The morning of Claire's wedding. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, trying to make my 20-year-old suit look respectable. Helen would have known exactly what to do. She always had a way of making me look like I belonged anywhere. But Helen had been gone for 2 years now, and I was still figuring out how to navigate fancy places like the Driscoll Resort. I drove my old pickup to Austin, feeling more out of place with every mile. The resort parking lot was filled with luxury cars that cost more than most people make in a year. My dusty Ford looked like a lost cattle dog among thoroughbred horses. Inside, everything screamed expensive. Crystal chandeliers hung from impossibly high ceilings. Marble floors reflected fresh flowers that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I felt like I was walking through a museum where I wasn't supposed to touch anything. Claire looked absolutely beautiful in her grandmother's wedding dress, the one Helen had carefully preserved. For a moment, I could almost feel Helen standing beside me, proud of the woman our little girl had become. Claire was glowing with happiness, and that was all that mattered. But Ethan's family made sure I knew exactly where I stood. His mother, Patricia Hayes, swept past me like I was invisible, her diamond jewelry catching the light as she air-kissed wealthy guests. When she did acknowledge me, it was with the kind of smile people give to service workers. "You must be Claire's father," she said, looking me up and down like she was appraising livestock. How rustic. Ethan's father shook my hand with the enthusiasm of someone handling a dead fish, and immediately started talking to someone more important. I watched them work the room, these people who measured worth by bank accounts, completely unaware that the man they were dismissing could buy and sell most of them without breaking a sweat. The ceremony was beautiful. Claire radiated joy walking down the aisle, and even Ethan looked genuinely happy. For 30 minutes, I forgot about social hierarchy and focused on my daughter starting her new life. Then came the reception. They seated me at table 12, tucked away behind a flower arrangement the size of a small aircraft. From there, I had a perfect view of absolutely nothing except other guests' backs. I could hear laughter from the important tables up front, but I might as well have been eating in the kitchen. That's when Ethan approached me for the first time all day. He was all smiles and charm, but I could see something calculating in his eyes. He pulled up a chair, blocking my view even more. "Cole, I'm so glad we finally have a chance to talk," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I've been wanting to get to know my new father-in-law better." I nodded politely, wondering what he really wanted. In my experience, when someone starts by telling you how glad they are to see you, they usually want something. "You know, I've been thinking," Ethan continued, leaning closer like he was sharing a secret. "A man like you, living alone on that big ranch, you must worry about the future, about security." There it was, the hook, delivered with a sympathetic smile and concerned eyes. Ethan Hayes had no idea he was about to go fishing in waters full of sharks. 3 days after the wedding, Ethan showed up at my ranch driving a brand new Mercedes. He stepped out wearing a magazine-perfect suit, his leather shoes so shiny they reflected the Texas sun. Everything about him screamed money and superiority. "Cole, what a charming little place you have here," he said, looking around like he was surveying a slum. The way he said "little" made it clear my 800 acres was nothing more than a backyard garden to him. I'd been running this ranch for 30 years. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest work. Every inch held memories of Helen and me building our life together. But to Ethan, it was just dirt that could be turned into profit. "Coffee," I offered. "Actually, let's walk the property," he said, pulling out his phone to take pictures. "I have some ideas that might interest you." As we walked, Ethan kept pointing out inefficiencies. The barn Helen and I built with our own hands was structurally outdated. The pasture where my cattle grazed was underutilized land with development potential. The creek that had provided water for generations was a natural feature that could attract luxury buyers. "You know, Cole, a man your age shouldn't be dealing with all this responsibility," he said, his voice taking on a tone that made my skin crawl. "Ranch work is dangerous. Accidents happen all the time. Falls, equipment malfunctions. Animals can be unpredictable." The way he said accidents didn't sound concerned. It sounded like a threat. I've been thinking about your situation, Ethan continued. You're 62, living alone, no one to check on you regularly. What if something happened and no one found you for days? This wasn't concern. This was intimidation, delivered with a smile. That's why you should consider my proposal, he said, pulling out a thick folder of official-looking documents. I know developers who specialize in turning properties like this into luxury resorts. Golf courses, spa facilities, you could make millions. I flipped through papers filled with legal jargon designed to confuse. This looks complicated. Not at all. You sign here. I handle everything else. There's a wonderful assisted living facility in Austin where you could enjoy your golden years without all these ranch worries. Assisted living? Ethan wasn't just after my land. He wanted to warehouse me somewhere convenient while he stripped everything Helen and I had built. And if I don't want to sell? I asked quietly. Ethan's smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold. Well, like I said, ranch life can be dangerous for a man your age. Sometimes these old places become more trouble than they're worth. Insurance companies get nervous about liability issues. Banks start asking questions about whether elderly owners can properly maintain their properties. The threat was crystal clear: cooperate or face consequences. I'll need time to think about it, I said. Of course, Ethan replied, his fake warmth returning. But don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't wait forever, and neither do the people who make them possible. He handed me the folder and walked back to his Mercedes, leaving me standing with papers that would sign away everything Helen and I had worked for. As his car disappeared down my driveway, I realized Ethan Hayes wasn't just a greedy son-in-law. He was something much more dangerous, and he had no idea that this old rancher was about to become his worst nightmare. That night, I couldn't sleep. Ethan's threats kept echoing in my head, mixing with memories of Helen's final months. She'd been so secretive, always taking mysterious phone calls and disappearing into her office. I'd assumed it was grief, but now I wondered if there was more. Around 3 a.m, I found myself outside Helen's office. I hadn't been in there since she died. The room still smelled like her lavender perfume. Her desk was covered with papers I'd never examined. Legal documents, bank statements, investment records. Helen had always handled our finances while I focused on the ranch. But as I went through her papers, I realized how little I knew about our financial situation. There were accounts I'd never heard of, investment portfolios with impossible numbers, and references to something called the Harrington Family Trust. Then I found the letter. It was in Helen's handwriting, sealed with my name on it. My hand shook as I opened it. My dearest Cole. It began, If you're reading this, it means someone is trying to take advantage of your generous heart. I've been preparing for this day, hoping it would never come, but knowing it probably would. Helen had known this would happen. The truth is, we're not poor. Coal. We never were. When my father died, he left me oil and gas rights generating income for 20 years. I also invested in land now worth millions. I kept this secret to protect you from people who might try to hurt us. My vision blurred as I kept reading. There's a safe behind the bookshelf. The combination is Claire's birthday. Inside, you'll find everything you need. The total assets are approximately $45 million, all legally yours and completely protected. $45 million. I had to read that 3 times. I've included contact information for Margaret Stone, my attorney. She knows about potential threats and has instructions to help you fight back. Don't let anyone steal what we built together. Cole, use every penny if you have to. I moved the bookshelf and found the hidden safe. Claire's birthday opened it easily. Inside were bank statements showing accounts with balances that made my head spin. Oil and gas royalties depositing hundreds of thousands monthly. Real estate investments worth millions. Stock portfolios beyond anything I could have imagined. Helen had been protecting me all along, living simply while building a fortune that would ensure I never had to worry about predators like Ethan Hayes. But more than that, she'd given me the weapons to fight back. I picked up my phone and dialed Margaret Stone's number. It was 4 a.m, but something told me this was exactly the kind of emergency Helen had prepared for. Margaret Stone speaking? Came a crisp voice after 2 rings. This is Cole Harrington. I think my wife told you this day might come. Mr. Harrington, I've been waiting for your call for 2 years. Can you come to my office this morning? We have a war to plan. As I hung up, I looked at Ethan's development papers sitting on my kitchen table. The man who thought he was hunting a helpless old rancher had no idea he'd just awakened a $45 million dragon. Margaret Stone's office sat on the 30th floor of a downtown Austin high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 50, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a handshake that could crack walnuts. Cole, please sit, she said, gesturing to a leather chair. Helen told me this day would come, She described exactly the kind of person who would target you. Ethan Hayes, I said. Let me guess. Charming. Well-dressed. Married your daughter for access to what he assumed were modest assets. Now he's pressuring you to make quick financial decisions. I stared at her. How did you know? Because Helen and I researched this extensively. Men like Ethan follow predictable patterns. They identify elderly widowers through family connections, assess their perceived wealth, then use manipulation and intimidation to gain control. Margaret pulled out a thick file labeled Ethan Michael Hayes. My blood ran cold. We've been investigating your son-in-law since he started dating Claire. She continued. Real estate license suspended in California for fraud. Gambling debts totaling over $200,000. 3 previous relationships with women whose elderly relatives have mysteriously signed over property rights. She spread photographs across her desk. Ethan at a casino. Ethan meeting with suspicious-looking men. Ethan signing documents at a lawyer's office that specialized in elder exploitation. He owes money to some very dangerous people. Cole, the kind who don't accept late payments. He's desperate, which makes him extremely dangerous. What about Claire, I asked. Does she know? Helen was adamant that Claire be protected from this knowledge unless absolutely necessary. But we have contingency plans if Ethan escalates his threats. Margaret opened another file. Here's what we're going to do. First, we document everything, every conversation, every threat, every pressure tactic. Second, we give Ethan enough rope to hang himself. She handed me a small device no bigger than a pen. Recording equipment. Texas is a one-party consent state, so anything he says to you is admissible in court. And then we spring the trap. We let Ethan think he's winning. Let him reveal his true intentions and criminal methods. When he's committed enough crimes on tape, we destroy him so completely, he'll never threaten another elderly person again. Margaret leaned forward, her expression fierce. Your wife didn't just leave you money. Cole, she left you the tools to become every predator's worst nightmare. Helen spent 2 years preparing for this war. Now it's time to fight it. She handed me another document. This establishes you as the primary funding source for a new elder protection program. When we're done with Ethan Hayes, we're going after his entire network. I looked at the papers, thinking about Helen's letter, about Ethan's threats, about other elderly people who might not have $45 million to fight back with. How much will this cost? I asked. Everything necessary. Margaret replied. Helen's instructions were very clear. Use whatever it takes. Make them regret targeting a rancher's family. As I signed the documents, I realized Ethan Hayes had made the most expensive mistake of his life. He thought he was hunting a helpless widower. Instead, he'd walked into the crosshairs of a very wealthy, very angry man with unlimited resources and professional help. The war Helen had prepared for was about to begin. 2 days later, I called Ethan and told him I was ready to discuss his proposal. His excitement was barely contained as we arranged to meet at an upscale restaurant in Austin. I chose a corner booth where Margaret's recording equipment would capture every word clearly. Ethan arrived wearing another expensive suit, his confidence radiating like heat from a furnace. He slid into the booth across from me, already acting like he owned everything I had. Cole, I'm so glad you came to your senses, he said, signaling the waiter for champagne. This is going to be the best decision you've ever made. I played my part perfectly, the confused old rancher, overwhelmed by big decisions. I've been thinking about what you said, about accidents and all. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am too old for ranch life. Ethan's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Exactly, and that assisted living facility I mentioned. Sunset Manor has an opening. Beautiful place. 24-hour care. All your meals prepared. You'd love it there. Sounds expensive, I said, letting worry creep into my voice. Don't worry about that. Once we develop your land, there'll be more than enough money. In fact, I've been thinking we should set up a trust fund to manage everything for you. Take all that financial stress off your shoulders. The recording device in my shirt pocket was capturing every manipulative word. What if I change my mind later? I asked. Ethan's mask slipped slightly. Well, that's the beauty of the assisted living arrangement. Once you're settled in, you won't have to worry about making those kinds of decisions anymore. The staff handles everything. Very peaceful. Very final. Final. The word hung in the air like a threat. And Claire? I pressed. What does she think about all this? Ethan's expression hardened. Claire understands that her father needs professional care. I've been helping her see how confused you've become lately. The forgetfulness. The poor judgment. She's actually quite worried about your mental state. My blood ran cold. Ethan had been poisoning my daughter against me, making her believe I was losing my mind. In fact, Ethan continued, leaning closer, I've already spoken to a doctor who specializes in elderly cognitive decline. One conversation with him, and we can have you declared incompetent to make financial decisions. For your own protection, of course. There it was. The complete plan laid out with chilling clarity. Ethan wasn't just after my money. He was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent, steal my assets, warehouse me in a facility where I couldn't cause trouble, and convince my own daughter it was for my own good. How long would all this take? I asked, my voice barely steady. Not long at all. I have all the paperwork ready. The doctor visit could happen this week. We could have you moved to Sunset Manor by next weekend. Very efficient. Ethan pulled out his phone and showed me photos of Sunset Manor. It looked more like a prison than a care facility. Small rooms, barred windows, patients sitting in wheelchairs staring at nothing. The best part, Ethan said with a smile that made my skin crawl, is that once you're settled in, you won't have to worry about anything ever again. No decisions, no stress, no complicated thoughts. Just peace and quiet for whatever time you have left. Whatever time I have left, Ethan was planning to bury me alive in that place. I'll need to think about it, I said. Ethan's friendly mask disappeared completely. I'm afraid thinking time is over. Cole, the people I owe money to aren't patient. You sign tomorrow, or things might get unpleasant for everyone involved, including Claire. The threat against my daughter was the last straw. Ethan Hayes had just signed his own death warrant. That evening, I called Claire and asked her to meet me at the ranch. My heart broke hearing the worry in her voice when she arrived. Dad, Ethan told me you've been having some difficulties lately? Memory problems? Confusion about finances? I'm so sorry I didn't notice. I looked at my daughter, seeing how Ethan had already begun poisoning her mind against me, but I also saw Helen's strength in her eyes, the same determination that had built our family's fortune in secret. Claire, I need to show you something, I said, leading her to Helen's office. Your mother left us both a message. I played Helen's recorded voice from a tape I'd found in the safe. Helen had anticipated this moment, too, preparing words for our daughter. My darling Claire. Helen's voice filled the room, making us both tear up. If you're hearing this, it means someone has tried to manipulate our family. Your father is not confused or incompetent. He's one of the smartest, strongest men I've ever known. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Claire's face went white as Helen continued. We're not poor, sweetheart. We never were. Your father is worth $45 million, and someone is trying to steal it by making you believe he's lost his mind. $45 million, Claire whispered, sinking into a chair. I showed her the bank statements, the investment records, the evidence of Ethan's criminal background that Margaret had compiled. But the recording from the restaurant was what shattered her world completely. As Ethan's voice filled the room, describing his plan to have me declared incompetent and imprisoned in Sunset Manor, Claire's face cycled through disbelief, horror, and finally, rage. He said I agreed to this, she said, her voice shaking. He told me I thought you needed professional care. He's been manipulating both of us, I said gently. Claire listened to the entire recording, her hands clenched into fists, as Ethan described his timeline, his threats, his casual dismissal of my life as something to be managed and discarded. When it ended, she was quiet for a long time. I have to go home, she said finally. I have to confront him. Claire, be careful. He's dangerous. So am I, she said, and I heard Helen's steel in her voice. 2 hours later, Claire called me, sobbing. Dad, I found his laptop. There are files on dozens of elderly people, photos, financial assessments, timelines for targeting them. There's even a folder labeled Cole Harrington, Priority Target, with pictures of our ranch, research on property values, and notes about your psychological vulnerabilities. My stomach turned. Ethan had been studying me like a predator studies prey. There's more, Claire continued. I found correspondence with the people he owes money to. They're threatening to hurt him if he doesn't pay by next week. That's why he's rushing this. Where is he now? Gone. When I confronted him, he didn't even try to deny it. He just got angry and said I was too stupid to understand business. Then he said if I didn't support him, I might end up as lonely as my crazy old father. The line went quiet, except for Claire's crying. Dad, I'm so sorry. I almost let him destroy you. You didn't know, sweetheart. That's how predators work. What do we do now? I thought about Margaret's plan, about the trap we'd prepared, about Ethan's desperation making him even more dangerous. Now we finish what your mother started. I said, we make sure Ethan Hayes never hurts another family again. The next morning, I called Ethan and told him I was ready to sign. His relief was audible through the phone. Smart decision. Cole, meet me at First National Bank downtown at 2 o'clock. I'll bring the notary and all the paperwork. What Ethan didn't know was that Margaret had already coordinated with the FBI. The bank's conference room was wired with cameras and microphones, and federal agents were positioned throughout the building. I arrived early, wearing a wire and carrying the recording device. Margaret sat in the lobby, pretending to read a magazine while monitoring everything through her earpiece. Ethan showed up with two men I didn't recognize. One was built like a linebacker with scars on his knuckles. The other had the cold eyes of someone who'd done terrible things for money. These weren't business associates. They were enforcers. "Cole, meet my colleagues," Ethan said with fake cheerfulness. "They're here to help ensure everything goes smoothly." The threat was clear: sign or face consequences. We sat around the conference table while Ethan spread out documents. The scarred man positioned himself by the door, while the other one sat directly across from me, never taking his eyes off my face. "Now then," Ethan said, sliding papers across the table. "This first document transfers your ranch to our development company. This second one establishes the trust fund I mentioned. And this third one gives me power of attorney to handle all your affairs." I pretended to read carefully while the recording equipment captured everything. "What happens after I sign?" I asked. Ethan's mask slipped completely. "Well, like I explained, you'll be moving to Sunset Manor this weekend. These gentlemen will help with the transition if necessary. And if I refuse..." The scarred man cracked his knuckles. Ethan smiled coldly. "Let's just say that elderly ranch accidents are tragically common. Falls down stairs, equipment malfunctions, even heart attacks brought on by sudden stress. The important thing is that everything would be properly documented before any unfortunate incidents occurred." There it was. Ethan was threatening to murder me if I didn't cooperate, and he was stupid enough to say it in a room full of federal recording equipment. "I see," I said calmly. "And Claire will grieve appropriately, then move on with her life. Widows are much easier to manage than wives with interfering fathers." Ethan was planning to kill me and make Claire a widow. The man was a complete psychopath. I picked up the pen, then set it down again. "You know, Ethan, there's something I should probably mention before I sign these papers." "What's that?" he asked impatiently. "I'm not actually poor." Ethan's expression shifted to confusion. "What are you talking about?" "I'm worth $45 million, and every word you've said in this room has been recorded by the FBI." The color drained from Ethan's face as federal agents burst through the conference room doors. "Ethan Hayes, you're under arrest for attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and elder abuse," the lead agent announced. Ethan's enforcers tried to run, but found more agents waiting in the hallway. Within minutes, all three men were in handcuffs. "This is impossible," Ethan sputtered. "He's just a broke rancher." "No," I said, standing up as they led him away. "I'm a very wealthy rancher who just destroyed your entire operation. Your wife spent 2 years preparing for this moment, and she taught me that some fights are worth every penny." As Ethan was dragged from the room, screaming about entrapment and illegal recordings, I realized Helen's plan had worked perfectly. The predator had become the prey, and justice was finally being served. The FBI investigation that followed was like watching dominoes fall. Ethan's laptop and phone records revealed a network of elder fraud that stretched across 3 states. Within a week, federal agents were knocking on doors from Texas to California, following a trail of devastated families and stolen life savings. Margaret kept me updated on every development. "They found 17 other victims so far," she told me during one of our weekly meetings. Elderly widows and widowers who lost everything to Ethan's operation. The total damages are approaching $12 million. $12 million stolen from people who trusted the wrong charming young man. The number made me sick. "There's more," Margaret continued. "Ethan's been cooperating, trying to reduce his sentence. He's given up his entire network. The FBI has arrested 23 people connected to this operation, including the 2 men who came to the bank with him." The trial began 6 months later. I sat in the courtroom watching Ethan try to play the victim, claiming he was just a desperate man who made poor choices. His lawyer painted him as someone driven to crime by gambling addiction and financial pressure, but the evidence was overwhelming. Recordings of Ethan threatening elderly victims, bank records showing systematic theft, testimony from other families who'd watched their loved ones lose everything to his schemes. The most damaging evidence came from Ethan's own files. He'd kept detailed records of his targets, rating them by vulnerability and asset value. He'd written psychological profiles describing how to manipulate each victim's fears and weaknesses. When it was my turn to testify, I looked directly at Ethan as I spoke. "This man didn't just try to steal my money," I said. "He tried to steal my dignity, my independence, and my relationship with my daughter. He planned to have me declared mentally incompetent and imprisoned in a facility where I would die alone and forgotten. That's not desperation. That's evil." Ethan's face was stone cold as I continued. But what makes this truly unforgivable is that he used my daughter's love against me. He manipulated her into believing her father was losing his mind. He was willing to destroy a family to line his own pockets. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of elder abuse, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. Ethan's face crumbled as the judge sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, but the real victory came during the victim impact statements. One by one, elderly people Ethan had robbed stood up and reclaimed their voices. A 78-year-old woman from California who'd lost her home. An 82-year-old man from Arizona who'd been forced into a nursing home after Ethan stole his retirement savings. "You thought we were easy targets because we're old," said Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher from Dallas. "You thought we were helpless, but we're not helpless when we stand together." As the judge led Ethan away in shackles, he looked back at me one final time. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow stare of a man who'd finally faced consequences for his actions. Outside the courthouse, Margaret and I were approached by FBI agent Morrison, who'd led the investigation. "Mr. Harrington, your case has changed how we handle elder fraud. The recording equipment, the coordination with local law enforcement, the systematic documentation of threats. It's become our model for future operations." "Good," I said. "No one should have to fight this battle alone." Agent Morrison smiled. "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. We'd like your help expanding this program nationwide." 6 months after Ethan's conviction, I stood in the Austin Community Center, looking out at an audience of ranchers, farmers, and elderly residents from across Texas. Claire sat in the front row, her eyes bright with pride. Margaret stood beside me with the documents that would change everything. "Folks," I began, "my name is Cole Harrington, and until recently, I thought I was just a simple rancher. Then I learned 2 important lessons. First, my late wife Helen was a lot smarter than I ever gave her credit for. Second, there are people who think being old makes us easy targets." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Helen left me $45 million with instructions on how to use it, not for luxury, but to protect people like us from predators who think our age makes us vulnerable. I gestured to Margaret. "Today, I'm establishing the Helen Harrington Foundation for Elder Protection. This foundation provides free legal services, investigation support, and financial assistance to any elderly person targeted by scammers." The applause was thunderous. "We're also creating a rapid response network. If someone pressures you into signing documents or threatens you, call our hotline. Within hours, you'll have a lawyer, investigator, and law enforcement support. Every service is completely free." Over the following months, the foundation grew beyond anything I'd imagined. We helped a veteran recover his stolen pension. We stopped fake charity scams. We helped bust nursing home fraud rings. The most satisfying moment came when Claire joined as executive director. "Dad," she said one evening on my ranch porch, "I keep thinking about what would have happened if Ethan had succeeded." "He didn't succeed," I reminded her. "That's what matters." "But what if you hadn't found Mom's letter? What if you hadn't had resources to fight back?" I thought about elderly people who didn't have Helen's foresight or $45 million for protection. That's exactly why we're doing this work, so other families don't face what we faced. Claire smiled, and I saw Helen's determination in her eyes. "Mom would be proud. She would be proud of you. You chose family over comfort, truth over lies. That takes real courage." As stars came out over my ranch, I reflected on this journey. Ethan Hayes thought he was hunting a helpless old rancher. Instead, he'd awakened something Helen had been preparing for years. The foundation now operates in 12 states, has helped over 300 families, and recovered more than $20 million in stolen assets. More importantly, it sent a message to every predator elderly people aren't easy targets anymore. Ethan Hayes learned that underestimating people based on age can cost you everything. I learned that Helen's love extended beyond her lifetime, creating a legacy protecting families across the country. Sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone thinks is harmless. Sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with weapons, but with wisdom and unwavering faith. Cole's transformation from a quiet rancher to a fierce protector shows us that God never wastes our experiences. Every hardship prepares us for a greater purpose. When Ethan underestimated this humble widower, he had no idea he was challenging someone backed by divine preparation and 45 million reasons to fight. The beauty of Grandpa's stories like Cole's lies in their reminder that our loved ones continue protecting us even after they're gone. Helen's secret planning wasn't just about money. It was about ensuring that God's justice would prevail when evil came knocking. Her legacy became a shield for countless families, proving that love transcends death and creates lasting change. What makes these grandpa stories so powerful is their demonstration that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they refuse to be victims. Cole could have accepted Ethan's manipulation, but instead, he chose to become a weapon against injustice. God often uses the least likely warriors to win the most important battles, turning quiet strength into thunderous victory. The Helen Harrington Foundation stands as proof that one family's courage can protect thousands of others. When we transform our pain into purpose, we honor both our past and our future. Which moment in Cole's story resonated most deeply with you? These grandpa stories remind us that heroes come in all ages. Drop a comment sharing how this tale of justice and family loyalty inspired you. Thanks for listening to my story. If this resonates with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, you're never too old to fight back, and you're never alone when you stand up for what's right.